about to die today. I am not dying today. That's where I was. And so I remember I was so happy when I filed the divorce. I just felt joy. I asked God to make my heart towards the situation the way that God's heart was. All right. Hello, God's good people. So I wanted to tell you how God took me from Chicago to Houston, not knowing anyone here in Houston, and he gave me specific instructions on what to do in Houston while I was yet in Illinois. I had been praying to experience marriage the way God intended for it to be. By that time, the marriage wasn't, my first marriage wasn't going the way that, marriage should be going. I'm giving love, but it just was not reciprocated, in my opinion. And, I got married in 1999. I waited, until marriage, and God kept me as a virgin until marriage, which was great. And God confirmed that he was the one, and, and he was happy to tell his pastor, and he was in church, and, things of that nature. And that's another story. But after that first year, things were a little different. We were praying, I suggested, hey, how about we pray and ask God what to do concerning our finances, concerning building wealth. At that time, we were debt free. We had multiple luxury vehicles. And so we prayed. And when I woke up that morning after praying, I woke up with real estate in my heart. And he woke up with gold. I thought of investing in gold. When I looked into investing in gold, we ran into a brick, and no one was really advocating for gold. It wasn't performing as well. The financial gurus were saying it's a bad idea. And so I left it alone and figured, I keep running into a roadblock with gold, and that's the thing God gave you. So let me let you handle that, and I'll handle real estate. So I was thumbing through a home magazine, and I saw a class being offered by Prudential, a real estate company in Illinois. And I enrolled in the class. It didn't cost very much. And I passed the class, but I failed the exam, the state exams. I could not get past that national test. So you get 3 chances. I failed all 3 times. Had to take the course again, passed the course again, got ready to take that exam. And I said, you know what? I have enough credits to do broker's license instead of the real estate salesperson's license. So I went for a broker's license, which means you can opt to do real estate without having to have a broker over you. You can be your own broker and build your own brand. And so I just thought, well, let me just go for that. And I went for it. Failed the first time, but I got it. I passed for brokers. So I'm on my way to brokers, right? Into real estate. So Prudential gives me amazing training, and my great training ground came from them and being able to overcome objections, right? So here I am. I'm in real estate. And my spouse doesn't really see it. He doesn't get it. And God is dealing with us concerning moving and letting go of the house that he's always had before we were married. And we were debt free. We had multiple luxury vehicles. It was his first time branching into luxury vehicles. And when we got married and we got them, they were debt free. We had methods to, pay off the debt and remain debt free doing that. And so when I would show him a real estate opportunity, then he, pretty much I was going all around. Well, what do you want? Do you want it this way? Do you want real estate that way? What type of house are you looking for? I'm trying to research and find, a home that he'd be happy with, and nothing seemed to work, right? And so, I said, well, you know what? I don't know, Lord, what do you say? And he wanted a certain amount for the home, and the Lord told me to tell him that God was going to increase the value of the home, and it would be an improve to move, not to stay, but to move. Well, we had a Chicago bungalow, and after, I don't know, it was a very short time. I mean, this was so many years ago, I can't even recall if it was a week or 2 weeks or 1 month. But very shortly thereafter, after the Lord told me to tell him that, we got a letter in the mail from, it was Mayor Daley at that time, who stated the Chicago Bungalow Initiative. And it was, something that would make your home a historic home, registering your home as a historic home. And so that was great. And just a few blocks over, they had already begun rehabilitating some of the brick homes. And we went and looked at them, and my goodness, they look so wonderful, completely rehabbed with some of the charm and character maintained for the bungalow. And he wanted to move down the street. And I said, no, God said improve to move, not to stay. Well, he wasn't happy with that. And so, after some time went on, and, we even saw something in Las Vegas because he had family there. He did not want to branch out there either. And the earnest money for that particular project was so inexpensive. Even his family members said, look, I'll give you the deposit because it's only a couple $100 and it's refundable. You have nothing to lose. See if your house sells and go for it. You need to get out of that neighborhood. We weren't in the best neighborhood living in the city, but everyone was kind of trying to encourage him. So when the wheels kept spinning and real estate just kept, passing us by, then there was one more opportunity. Well, let me back up. Before we got to this opportunity, I was helping clients who were former CPAs who had retired and started doing real estate full time. I remember, I had attorneys who were buying multiple properties. I had, other investors, and they were buying properties, and things were going, good for my clients, and we were building their portfolio. And one of my clients, the one that was the retired CPA, he asked me one day, well, do you have any real estate properties? No, just my home, that's it. And he asked me why. He said, you've got a really good eye for this. And you know the numbers, you understand it, you find the deals for everybody else. Why don't you have anything? And I said, well, because I know what it takes. And I just, have a fear about the investing side. Being an investor, I'm more so like, new construction, and I like to, flip or something like that as far as new construction, build and let it grow and then wait for the project to be completed. I'm more new construction. And so he said, well, you should reconsider investing type, deals. Oh, okay. And his his comment, just kind of, it stuck with me. And, I had prayed that prayer, Lord answered with real estate. And so I'm thinking that it was just, for doing sales, selling real estate. And so one day I go to a job site with my former husband with my husband at that time. And while he's at work, then, I kind of roll over and check out the community, and I found a new construction development that was going on. And when I went there, they were in closeout mode, meaning that they had pretty much sold the community out and may have had 1 or 2 lots or 1 or 2 inventory homes left. The model home was beautiful, had all the bells and whistles, and the salesperson was offering me one of the lots that was going up that was very similar to the model home. It was the same floor plan and had some of the same amenities going into it. And I thought, wow, this is a really good deal. She's like, yeah, plus you're a realtor, I'll give you incentives, to really make the deal sweet. So I took all the information and told her, give me the contract, give me everything. Builders have their own contracts. Give me everything. And so I wanted to discuss it with my spouse at that time. And I let him talk me out of it. But I knew that it was an opportunity. And I let him talk me out of it because he didn't see it. Then I just didn't want to push it, trying to pursue peace. And so I said, you know what, Lord, I'm asking you for another chance. Just give me another chance. And God did. I began hearing this song just play in my spirit, another chance. You've given me another chance to be set free. I don't know if any of you know that song, but it's just another chance. And I said, Lord, you're giving me another chance. Where is it? And I had this magazine in my hand, a home magazine. Now, I told you he had family that lived in Las Vegas. Well, when we had visited one time, I grabbed a free home magazine from the grocery store. And I had it at home. I was thumbing through it. And I saw a new construction condo development, which looked great. And I thought, ooh, this is nice and really good prices too. And I asked him for our monies to be split because we had our monies together, and which is great, but he was using all of the funds for pawn shops and, stuff that we didn't even need. And I kept saying, I thought we were gearing towards obeying God with real estate. God said to, improve to move. He did that. The value has been brought up and we're doing nothing. I've searched for everything that you wanted and it's been a reason why you didn't want it. And what? And so he said, I've been taking you for granted. If you want to, you take your money that you get and you do what you desire to do with it. And I told him, thank you. That would be great, because all I had been doing was just, handling the household bills and budget and not really doing anything except watch him spend it all on pawn shops, as I mentioned. In the middle of that conversation, here's what's so amazing. The phone rings and it's a realtor from Las Vegas asking me if I'm interested in the condo property that I had just looked at in the magazine. And she said she would send over some information. I told her I'm familiar with it. She'll send over some information in the mail. The next day or so, I get something in the mail. It's not from her. It's from the condo community, but it's addressed to someone else, but it's my address, but someone else's name from that same community. And I said, wow, Lord, okay. Confirmation by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established, right? And so all the while with real estate and all, there's the conversations that I've left out that my spouse and I had, and they just weren't great conversations, with this whole move. He didn't want to let go of the house. And so we advanced to where I am now, and I say, okay, Lord, it's another chance. He freed me up to do what I desire to do with my money. I want to obey you. And then this opportunity presents itself, right? And some days after, I get the wrong misfiled or mislabeled information in the mail, even though it has my address, it has someone else's name. Well, some days later, the mail from that other realtor comes to me in my name, so, which is great. And so I get involved with contacting the people, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, which unit, which floor plan should I invest in? So of course, I ask the Lord for wisdom, just like I do for my clients, and he always directs me to what they're looking for. Well, it was no different asking for myself. And so I asked the Lord, and I said, well, Lord, I always encourage people, in wisdom, buy a home based on one person's income if you're married. And the Lord said, yeah, that's true. He said, but I want you to buy it based on one person's income, but based on the lesser of your 2 incomes. And I said, okay, that would be me. And so that helped me and direct me as to which unit I could comfortably afford based on my income alone. As that's what the deal would be based on. He didn't want to have his name on it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He's like, you do with your money whatever you want to do, as long as I'm not involved. So, after he had talked me out of that first deal, I didn't tell him anything about this one, because I was free to do what I wanted and he's free to do what he wanted with his funds. And, we didn't have any debt. So there was no questions. What you doing with yours? And so I contract this condo and it's to be built. And at this time, this had to be about 2003 or so. And I'm still praying, God, I want to experience marriage the way you intended for it to be, because this, back and forth, and I want to obey you and he want to do something different. God, I just want your love in this marriage. I'm not sure why there's this friction and there's this tension that's going on, but it's not the way you intended for marriage to be. He should submit to you. I submit to you. We submit, to you as a team. And there wasn't that, in my opinion. And so I get to this condo and write up the contract, and I have the earnest money, but they can't, cash the check just yet. And I've heard other people tell stories of this, but this is mine from 2003. So it was amazing when, I've heard someone else share about the check not being made good. And so I'm not the only one. And so I had some deals that were on the table, but the deal kept getting pushed. So I told them, well, just wait. I'll have the rest of the earnest money once this closing closes. I have it. And I showed them the contract, sent that over and everything. The closing, it kept getting pushed, the closing date. And so because I had the proof of the closing and all that kind of stuff, then God gave me favor, and they kept holding the unit until I had the money, which was so good. And all the while, I haven't shared it with my spouse, but he's still conversating about real estate, and he don't see it. And one day he goes on an appointment with me, and he didn't see why this 2-story building should be all that. He just saw it as, look, he didn't see it. That was his expression, look. And I was trying to explain to him the numbers and why it was such a great buy, and there wasn't even much to do with it, and what the rental income was. I was showing him the numbers like I would a client. And I said, Lord, this is a good deal. What do you think about it? And the Lord said, it is a good deal, but it's not for you. It's for your other client. I said, okay. And I knew just the one who that was for. So I told her about it, and she came to the appointment. My spouse at that time rode to the appointment with me, talking about it, as I mentioned. And I went on in with my client, who arrived later, and she brought an investment friend with her. She wasn't so sure about it because she didn't know the area, but the investor friend, knew about the area. The numbers were good, and he said, if you don't buy this, I will. And she said, okay. And me, being the agent that I was, had the contract ready, said, sign here, press her 3 copies, And so she signed the deal, her offer. And I got back to the car, and my spouse said, wait before you say anything at all. Now, he didn't see what they were doing because we were inside the unit, and I came out with the same papers, my, briefcase that I walked in with. I came out with that. So he didn't know what went on. But when I got in the car, he said, wait, don't tell me anything. Let me tell you this first. I was sitting in this car, and I was complaining to God about what was taking you so long in there. And I didn't see, what the big deal was with this whole real estate thing. I didn't see it. And I said, well, Lord, if you're dealing with her concerning real estate, let these people buy this piece of property right now today. And then I'll know you're dealing with her concerning real estate. So I pulled out my papers and showed them. They signed. God is dealing with me. He has been dealing with me concerning real estate, and so God had been trying to use me to tell him about it, but he just wasn't receiving it. So when he seemingly received it at that point, then I, decided later on to go on and share with him the deal that I did in Las Vegas, the condo. And I was showing him as the numbers were growing, I got so excited, and I was showing, look, now the value is at this. Now the minimum base price is this. And it kept rising. And this was 2003, 2004. And it just kept rising. And his comment in that was more so what you gonna do? Because you're on commission and you need to have some steady income. So what are you gonna do to afford it? I mean, you're gonna have to close. How much does it cost to close? So he went more into the analytical side of it, and how much was it going to cost, how are you going to do this, and it became so heavy that I felt like just quitting and giving up at that point. And I hadn't told anyone else about the deal I had done, just because I didn't want anyone to try and stop it, any hindrances. And my mom called when I was ready to just say, you know what, forget it. I just want peace. I don't want any more arguing. I don't argue. I wasn't raised to do this kind of stuff. And I just forget it. My mom called with a word from God, not knowing my situation. And she said, daughter, I don't know what it is that you're going through right now, but I want to encourage you. Don't you quit. That's what she said. Don't you quit. And I said, okay. And she said some other things, and we had a conversation. I still didn't tell her. I don't believe I did at that point. And I says, okay. Time goes on. It's getting close. I'm still in between commissions. I'm still getting, the nagging from him, the pressure. What you gonna do? Well, why does God have you doing this? And I have to keep answering, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do with the property. I'm just obeying God. That's all I want to do is just obey him. I don't have any other answers. I don't know what's going to happen in the end. I don't know if I'm going to keep it. I don't know if it'll be a vacation property. It would be great. I don't know if I'm going to, what I'm going to do with it. I don't know. I'm not at that point yet. And so because I didn't know, and because I wanted to at least give him something, I went out and got a job. So just any job, I just wanted to get him off my back. And I went to a department store, major large chain department store. And I decided to be a merchandising associate because that's what was open. It wasn't paying a lot, but it was something. It was consistent. And, the merchandising person picks up the clothes, from the dressing rooms. Wasn't a fun job, but it was a job, and I did it. And after a couple weeks, they were like, you don't belong there. And they pulled me into the HR department. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, thanks. And it wasn't paying a whole lot more, but hey, it had benefits. It was more, it was consistent. He was more happy with a title, HR manager. And so he, meaning my spouse at that time. And so that's what I was doing. And that was about a year or so, a couple years maybe about a year, because in 2005, it was getting close. The condo was getting close to being completed. And I took my parents, my stepdaughter at that time, and my spouse to the appointment, for us to pick out some things for my unit. And at that appointment, the Lord spoke a word to him and told him, God said, no more deals, no more negotiating, but you have to make a decision. And even though he had saw the vision and had seen the place coming full, being developed, he still wasn't willing to agree with what God was doing concerning real estate, even though we had prayed and asked God, for wisdom and to grow wealth. And, I woke up with real estate. He woke up with gold. I went ahead and forged on into real estate. And he just wasn't willing to do that. So as when we come back home, then I'm working this job, and the Lord told me to quit. He tells me to quit the job. And I says, okay, God. Normally you give a 2 weeks notice. But when God told me to quit, I just knew in that moment that he was talking about right now. He said, do you trust me? And I said, yes, Lord, I trust you. Then let it go now. So I drove on in to work. I had written up a resignation letter. And you should give a 2 weeks notice. That's the proper thing to do, right? And I would never advise anybody to do any of this that I'm doing, except for the part of just obeying God. Whatever he tells you to do, obey God. But not to take what I'm doing as a blueprint. Well, first I'm gonna do this and do that, and I'm gonna get with she God. Don't do that. Obey God. That's better. Just obey whatever he told you to do. Then do that. And so I went in with my letter, and I told my assistant, today will be my last day. I didn't know it, and I'm gonna recommend you for the job. You've been trained for it. Didn't know you were being trained for this. I was, helping her to be, for us to be great as a team and her to be a great assistant. And I said, you can do this. She had never had the confidence before with the previous manager. And I told her, you got this, you can do it. She was older than I was. And, maybe the technicality part of it, made her feel a little inferior, but I encouraged her, you can do it. We've broke the mold on some things in this place. And not one manager was there. That's what was so amazing. No manager in the entire department was there, and there had to be at least 30-something managers in this store. Mind you, it was a major retailer. It was major across the country. Not one manager that day in the entire store. And I said, well, Lord, I'm gonna still do it. So I slipped my note underneath the door, and I handed the keys to the lead person sitting at the front desk and told her, Miss Michelle, it's my last day today. Really? Yeah, I wanted to let a manager know, but nobody's here. Yeah, I don't know where they are today. Something's weird, right? And so I quit. Memorial Day weekend rolls around. Now I don't have a job. And the spouse is wondering now what you gonna do, and it's even heavier. Just the talking, he's across the street sharing, bad mouthing me with the neighbor. It was just bad. And just the mental pressure of that, just not supported. It was heavy. And I just want to enjoy marriage the way you intended for it to be. And I just ask you for peace, God. Just ask you for peace. Memorial Day weekend, we were hanging out with my parents, and there was a church service at the church that we were attending. And I didn't want to go. I mean, it's Memorial Day weekend. What are we doing? And it's already late. And it was like God just shut my mouth and said, don't say anything. Because these were my thoughts. But not wanting to cause an argument, I didn't voice them. I closed my mouth and shut down those thoughts too. And I went to the service. We sat in the back since we were a little late, sat in the back. And the guest minister, whom I had never heard of before, called us to the front. That had never happened before either. And he began speaking a word from the Lord. And he first went at my spouse and said it so hard, just the same manner that my spouse had been with me. That minister said, she's been trying to tell you. She's been trying to tell you. And he just went in and just exposed so much. And then he had said, and you come home with things on your shoulder from the neighbors with you talking. I went, whoa, oh my gosh. And remember, I was saying I was under contract, but I had to wait to make the money good, and because I was in between deals, and they kept extending it for me. Well, that minister, he turned to me and he goes, and daughter, when he finishes with my spouse, and daughter, you have everything that you need. God says you have everything you need. Now, I had quit the job, I'm in between deals, and God said, you have everything that you need. He didn't know that, but God just confirmed and kept me strengthened for that step that I needed. And so I was so excited and so happy. But you know what? It made my spouse seems like turn into a hatred even more. By that time, his mom was staying with us, and things happened in a relationship situation with another family member. And through that process, then our home was open for her to stay. And the treatment between the two of them, that spirit was so heavy and so hard. There were things that I was asked to do that was, just not good, staying up late, washing clothes, being told how to wash them, what to do. Between the two of them, being called names, being mocked when I was speaking tongues. It was just awful. And I had never experienced that before, ever. And I had to be at work early that next morning. And my job, by this time I had picked up another job, and it was at another retailer doing clothes. And I had picked up a management job, making a little bit better money, even though God had told me to quit the other one. Well, just to get out of the house at this point, it wasn't a reliance on work, but just to get out of the house, I found something else to do in retail and did that. And it went into management, and it was so far away from home. So the drives into work were just great. And my parents showed up at my job that morning. And it was quite a distance. But the Lord had told my mom to come to my job, which she did. And when she saw me, she didn't tell me at this time, I looked so bad. And she was like, what happened? I said, well, I was up all night washing because he wanted the clothes a certain way, and he didn't want the sheets, done a certain way. And so I had to stay up and do all that. She kept that in her heart. And it was good to see them. And they obey God. And I think God was just setting some things up so that down the line, when certain things were to take place that I didn't know of, then God had some confirmation for them to go on some things. And so there was another time, remember, I want to enjoy marriage the way God intended for it to be. And there was another time when I was home, and my parents wanted to come visit my mom. It was just on her, go and see Cindy. They called me Cindy. Go and see her. So my dad drove her over to the city where I was, the bad part, and from their location, and I couldn't open up the door to welcome them in because I had been locked in. And my spouse, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot I got the key. But she's really good about knowing about all the keys and things. But at this particular time, now he, forgot the key, apparently. And my parents kept that marked in their heart as well, and kept me lifted up in prayer. So I hadn't been sharing things with them because, you just believe, your relationship is between you and your spouse, and you pray. And you believe God for the best, and it's till death do you part. And you don't even realize sometimes you're being abused or in a toxic situation until you're out of it. And, there was other things that just happened that I just didn't realize that it was toxic. And the Lord began to give me a desire, for better, for first class lifestyle. And I started telling everyone, God wants me to live a first class lifestyle, wants me to live a first class lifestyle. And so I just believed him when he said it. Wanted me to enjoy a first class lifestyle, and I wanted to enjoy marriage the way he intended for it to be. This condo is coming to a close. I'm trying to make plans for what we're going to do with the proceeds because it's so huge. His mom is staying with us, and the Lord told me to offer it to her for the price that I paid for it. So even though the value was nearly doubling, he told me to offer it to her for the price that I paid, which means I would be giving up all the equity and she would have it. So I did. She rejected the offer several times because she wanted me to go in with her and do it. I said, that's not what God is telling me. Well, why do you think that is? I said, I think God is dealing with you concerning your finances. I don't know. What else? I'm not sure, but I can't. And the Lord told me, don't trust the frame, meaning the outward appearance. And I said, okay. And he said, remember what you lost before in another situation? It will be worse if you trust the frame. And I said, okay. And he said, if she rejects it again, it was coming near to close and finish. If she rejects it again, I want you to take it and sell it. Even though now you can afford to keep it, I want you to sell it. Because remember, I had another job by then. And I said, okay, Lord. And so I offered it to her again. She rejected it. And I called the people and said, put it up for sale. 1, 2, 3. And we started getting offers on it. I started getting offers. And within a couple of days, it was under contract. And that same day, when she rejected it, well, later on that evening, she called back. It seems as though, and I may be wrong, but it just seems as though there was a conversation between her and her son, my spouse, at that time. And it seemed like there was a plan in place, whereas he wouldn't do anything with the real estate when God was telling us to do something. He was willing to sacrifice or do a line of credit on the home in order to help his mom obtain the home that I was offering her, the condo I was offering her. And then they would sell it, split the proceeds. She would pay him back the line of credit. She would have more money and be able to move on. But I'm glad that I didn't trust the frame and I obeyed God. Well, my spouse kept that in his heart. And apparently, you learn some things in hindsight after the fact. And we ended up being married for about a total of 11 years. Well, what God had me to do when that property was coming to a close in 2005, he told me to sell it. And with the proceeds, then I was saying to my spouse, well, we can buy a property and do some things and, have this and that. Well, God told me when he rejected it, it was like, no, you do whatever you want with it. I won't take anything from you. And I was like, well, it's been a thing in my heart for a long time to tithe the 5 figures. I've always wanted to do that, which means you had to earn 6. And this property yielded the 6 figures. And I was able to tithe the 5 figures to the church. And I was so excited to do it because it was the desire of my heart. I know there's conversation around tithes and all that, but no one was compelling me to do it like the scripture says that they shouldn't do. No one was requesting it of me. It was cheerfully that I gave it because it was what I purposed in my heart to give that amount. And I did. And I did it cheerfully. And I bought a luxury vehicle cash that really felt like it was mine. It was an Audi. And I didn't have anyone over me telling me or controlling me on how to use what was to be our car. And so I was grateful for that. And the Lord told me then, he said, I want you to go to Texas and establish a business in Texas. And I want you to do Pottery Barn. He said, Pottery Barn, establish a business in Texas. And he said something else too. And I started telling my spouse that. He's like, well, how's that going to work? I said, I don't know. And I shared it with my mom, and she said, God is causing you to leave your spouse. I said, what? No. And when I shared it with my spouse and he had asked, well, how's it going to work? Then, his mother had been staying with us and she needed a place to go to. And she said, well, I'm looking for a place to go, Dan. I need some place to go. I said, well, now I'm looking into Texas and it looked like the prices are really great. Maybe there's something there for you. And so in the process of time, she ended up moving to Texas. And so he had stated, I'll go there too and wrap up everything with the business, close everything up, and I'll go too. But, I still have my daughter to consider. She was an adult, but still a young adult. She surprised everybody and said, hey, I want to move to Texas. She bought a house down here in Texas too, which was awesome. So his excuses were leaving. We're going away, which is something. And I says, okay, Lord, number one, what's Pottery Barn? I don't know what that is. Is that a ceramic place? I wondered, in Texas. The picture of just hay rolling around kind of came across my mind. And I didn't know what that was either. And so I'm riding around Michigan Avenue trying to find Pottery Barn. I had never heard of it before, and I'm trying to see if there's one in Illinois. Well, number one, what I was really trying to do was to stay in Illinois because I was married, and my spouse was asking and questioning again, how's that going to happen? While at the same time, when his mom is under contract to move to Texas, he's asking, well, and his daughter says she wants to come, then he's, well, I can shut everything down and I can, move to Texas too, eventually over time. And I says, okay. And so I'm thinking, well, for now, maybe I'll do Pottery Barn in Illinois if I find wherever that is. And when I found Pottery Barn, I get a phone call and it's from a group member. I sang in an a cappella group, and she said, hey, what you doing? Where you at? And I told her I'm downtown Michigan Avenue trying to find Pottery Barn. What's that? I don't know. Is that ceramics? I said, that's what I thought, but I'm trying to find out what it is. And I think I just found it. So let me call you back. Well, what did you go for? There was no rehearsal for that night. And so Miss Sharice can witness to this story too. And so I go into Pottery Barn, I have my resume, and they didn't have any openings. And I said, well, do you have any openings in Texas perhaps? And so they said, well, we'll just keep it and we'll circulate it around to see if there's any openings at all. I says, okay, thanks. And so I leave. And then I said, well, since I have the job here in Illinois, maybe I can transfer with the job I already have and do that in Texas. And so I tried to go that route, and the door got closed. It was just so weird, the things that happened with that whole process. And I ended up without a job at all, trying to transfer from one store to another, transfer to Texas. And the people in Texas were ready and willing, but something happened there. I couldn't even explain it except that it wasn't what God told me. He said Pottery Barn in Texas. He didn't say Pottery Barn in Illinois. He didn't say the other store in Texas. He said Pottery Barn in Texas. So I go to visit the house in Texas. And because, I ended up getting a home down there when my spouse went with his mom to look at a property with her that I had recommended. Then I had put a property under contract. When he said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, we can get a house cash, when this deal closes, when the condo closes. No, I don't want to do that. And I'm not going to take any of your money. And I'll be the first one to vouch for you. And you get your car if that's what you want to do, or whatever you want to do. I says, okay, because we can get a house cash. No, that's okay. Okay. And so what I did was I put a house under contract. And I wanted to surprise him for it being our home, trying to just do something, right? And I told the salesperson, now don't share with him that that I already put it on the contract, because I want to see his real reaction when he comes. Okay, he'll be there with his mom. They're looking at something else for her, you know. And I didn't take any proceeds or do anything with his mom's deal. I just handed her the information because I didn't want it to be said, you know, you're trying to take advantage of this woman or whatever. I just, here's the info. You can take it and run, find a realtor, whatever you want to do with it, but have you considered Texas? And so they get down there to the model home and they're looking at it. I told them, just take a look when you get there. Okay. So they're looking at it. The salesperson calls me after they leave. They just left. I said, yeah, so what does he think? Yeah, he didn't like it. I said, really? It's got all the bells and whistles. I mean, the media room, it's brand spanking new, being built. He didn't care for the floor plan? And this is huge. Nope, he didn't really care for it. I said, okay, well, guess I'll have to cancel the contract then. And so I went to do that, and they didn't want to give my earnest money back. I said, well, I'm about to get legal on this and get my money back. That's a lot of earnest money. And the Lord said, allow yourself to be done wrong for my sake. I said, what? Allow yourself to be done wrong for my sake in this instance. And I found a scripture for it. And I says, okay, Lord, I'm gonna leave it alone. Well, through the process of time, his mom moves, you know, to Texas, to a nice part. The condo works out. It's perfect for her. And I said, Lord, you told me to establish my business in Texas in Pottery Barn. What part in Texas do I go to find Pottery Barn? And the Lord said, now go back to that builder who wouldn't give you your money back, and I want you to look in their least expensive community and buy one of their homes there. I said, okay. So I went online, looked up that builder who still had my earnest money, looked at their least expensive community, and I said, it's all right, that lands me here. So that's where I'll go look. And I contacted that builder and I said, now you guys have some of my earnest money. Can I use that earnest money to apply for this deal? He said, yeah, you can do that. We'll just transfer it. So I didn't have to come out of pocket with anything extra. Praise the Lord. And that was great. And so then I get to Texas, close on the home, you know, over the mail and wire, and get to the home. And of course, I don't have a job because me transferring from Illinois to Texas didn't work. And the overwhelming joy of work while I was down here in the house just overwhelmed me. And I was just thanking God for work. And let me say this, when I got down here, I drove down. My spouse didn't drive me down. He didn't want to do it. He said it's work and whatever excuse he gave. And I was just going to obey God and just come by myself. And my friend, whom I call Quevelin, affectionately called Quevelin, said, Cindy, you're not going to be driving to Texas by yourself, are you, in that car, are you? I said, yeah, I'm going to obey God. I'm not going to give any excuses. I'm just do it. I'm going to pack up some stuff, you know, and live between the two places. I'm going to obey God. You know, I asked my spouse about it. He said, since you got a house down there, it makes sense, you know, to be down there with it. So I'm a roll. Now I'm a drive with you. And, you know, she's used to driving distances. And so she drove with me. I said, then I'll fly you back. And so we get down there. And so I flew her back. And so, like I said, I'm in the house and I just start praising and thanking God for work. And I said, ooh, that was a good worship moment. Let me go get something to eat. So I went to the mall that wasn't far away, and there was Cheesecake Factory, one of my favorite places at that time. And when I parked in their parking lot to go for in dining, to dine in, I looked up and there was a Pottery Barn right there, sharing the same parking space. And so I said, oh my goodness, let me go in there first. When I walk in, the people recognize me, the manager recognized me. I had never been in there before, but my resume was. The Pottery Barn in Illinois forwarded my resume to the Pottery Barn in Texas, and they saw it. And I didn't know which Texas they were sent, which part of Texas it was going to, but they sent it, I guess, to Texas. And that was one of them that got it, was that specific one. And she says, "Oh, I recognize your face from your picture on the resume." I said, "Oh, wow, thank you." And so she said, "Well, the regional manager, we don't have any openings here, but the regional manager for our sister store, the kids store next door, was just in here asking if we knew anybody for a management position that's open." I said, "Oh." She said, "Go over there now and see if she's still there," because she literally just walked in and just left. And that would have been Miss Keeley. And so I go over there and I said, "Hey, I was just sent over from next door and for management position, and I can send you a copy of my resume, you know." And the manager that was there, one of the managers, Miss Tracy, she says, "Oh, okay." And she looked at me, you know, my picture's on my resume, and she looks, oh, it's so cute. And she says, "Okay, well, I have Miss Linda to set you up with an interview. Can you do an interview, tomorrow?" Which would mean I would be there for the weekend. I said, "Well, let me double check. It's possible." "Okay, well, just call us, let us know." And so I share that with my spouse, and he says, "Well, just stay there for the weekend. It makes sense instead of flying back up and going back down." So I did, and I got the job. Praise the Lord, got the job. And that was in November, I believe it was, that I was to start in 2005. And so my spouse still hadn't come. I was still waiting. I wanted to enjoy marriage the way God intended. He had promised that he would come. It had been 5 years now since I was in Texas, still waiting and flying back and forth between the two places. And he never came. And I still stayed faithful and waiting. By the time let me back up some. In 2008, we had gotten married in 1999. In 2005, then we had been married for about 5 years or so, and we divorced in 2010. By the time 2008 rolled around, where I was looking at upgrading the place that I was in, and the Lord had told me to put it up for lease. And my spouse was saying, "No, sell it, let it go." And the Lord said, "Put it up for lease." And it was up for sale, but nothing was happening, while I'm building this other property that I was doing. And the Lord said, "Put it up for lease." And I says, "Okay." I said, "Well, Lord, I want to obey my spouse and be in agreement. So what do I do? Because he's saying sell, you're saying lease. What do I do?" And the Lord said, "Put it up for sale or for lease. And whichever way it goes, that's what you do." I said, "Okay." And so I told my spouse, "I'm going to put it up for sale or for lease," because I had it up for sale, nothing was happening. So I'm going to put it up for sale or for lease. As soon as I added that lease part to it, then the person who helped me move my furniture in the property is the same one who leased it. And I met her at a model furniture home sell-off from the model home in the community. And we were standing at the door together for that sale. And she's like, "You gonna try to move your furniture in that Audi?" "No, me and my sons can help you in the truck. Your house right there? Yeah, we don't put that in your car." And I was so grateful. And so some years later, because that was in about 2005, 2006 with the model furniture sell-off. Then 2008 when I was building another home. And it was a KB home that I was building the second time around. I'm going somewhere with that. Stick with me. And so she says, "Okay, well, I'm interested in we hadn't seen each other since the model home sell-off, and her helping me that one day, and we were strangers. And when I put the house up for lease, as I was leaving out for that showing appointment, then she came driving around the corner for the appointment to look at the house. And I recognized her truck and recognized her in her truck. And I looked at her and she looked at me, and we both pointed and said, "Hugh." And I said, "Hugh, are you going to look at my house for lease?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "It's yours. I don't care what your paperwork says. I don't care what your credit documentation is, any of that. It's yours. And I'm going to let my agent know to give it to you." She says, "Okay," because she helped me. And so she became my first tenant, which was great. Great relationship. You know, her and her boys, they love Jesus too. And so when it came time for me to close on the new property that I was building, then of course, before I even started building, that I mentioned it to my spouse. And he says, yeah, that's a great idea. That's great. That's fine. And so he's like, "You know, you just got to be ready and financially ready and this and that." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be ready." So I sold my Audi, y'all. I sold it and bought another car cash. It was I forget, a Mitsubishi Outlander, I think. Bought that little red truck cash. And it was quite different, but hey, I wanted my house. And so my spouse had just came to visit. It was early part of 2008, I want to say January. And he saw how it was coming along, and it was looking great and looking really good. And it was getting ready for closing, I think in February or March 2008. And he wouldn't sign the documentation acknowledging that we were married. And just like I had did on the other deals, with just my information, just my credit, just the cash that was mine, I was doing no different this time. And he had approved it and saw it and encouraged me in it. And I sold my Audi. And he said, "No, I'm not going to sign." And the mortgage company and all the people were just trying to do whatever he wanted just so that your wife gets this house. He's in Chicago. I'm here in Texas, ready to close. I'm driving around on closing day, not knowing if he's going to change his mind or what's going on. Well, something had taken place. And the thing that took place was God had given me a dream. And in this dream, I dreamed that a man was in our home in Chicago, and he pointed a gun at me, and he shot point blank at me. And he said, "Now see what your God can do." And he treated me as though I was dead. He thought he hit me and that I was dead. And I had to play dead, or else if he knew I was still alive, he'd finish me off in the dream. And I woke up and I said, "Lord, what is going on with that?" And I would weep. Now I'm in Texas, he's in Illinois. And I would just weep and weep each day. And then I would begin to pray, "Lord, just what's going on?" And the Lord said, "Are you ready for what I'm about to do with your spouse?" And I said, "Lord, ready me." Well, when he wouldn't acknowledge that he was married, because, in Texas, the type of state that we're in, you can't necessarily buy a home if you're married, without your spouse signing off on it. Even though they may not be responsible for the mortgage, then still there has to be that acknowledgement there. And there's more details into that too. And he just wouldn't do it. And they said, "Well, you can do a quick claim deed afterwards, take your name off the title, but you're not on the mortgage. There's no responsibility, but we need her to close on this property. And, she's going to be without anything if you don't do this." Because mind you, I had leased my home, so I'm out of that. And the other home is waiting for me to move into, and I can't afford it. I sold my Audi as well, so I have more cash. I didn't have any debt on that and didn't have debt on my other vehicle, and I'm ready to close. And he would not cooperate. Remember when the door was closed for his mom, and I did not I put the condo up for sale. Well, they came back later on that evening, changing their mind, saying it's okay, I'll take it. And I said, well, I'm sorry, the door is closed. And it felt just like how Noah's Ark, with Noah's Ark, the angel closed the door and no man could open that. That's how that moment felt when the last time I offered it to her, she rejected it. And then later on that evening, after they seemed like they did some type of agreement or planned some type of scheme, as I'll call it, I said, the door is closed now. Well, he, in hindsight, I believe, was paying me back for closing the door on his mom, because he refused to sign for me, needing to close the deal. And you know what he said to me? He said, let you and God do it. You said God told you to do this, let you and God do it. And when he told me that over the phone, the dream that I had when I was saying God ready me for what was to come, and I had been mourning, that dream came up. Those words with the person in the dream shooting me point blank, thinking that they had killed me, saying, now see what you and your God can do. I said, Lord, it was him. Okay. And I still didn't divorce him then. But the Lord began dealing with me to let him go. And I didn't want to do that. But I was still praying, Lord, I still want to experience marriage the way you intended for it to be. It's till death do we part. And I don't want to, just give up. I believe you can do anything. I'm still ready, willing, and able. And I'm just praying for him and praying for him. Well, a series of events happen while I'm praying for him. He calls me and tells me that he has this dream that he's on the road and he's going down the highway in the wrong direction, I believe it was, and the state trooper pulled him over to give him a ticket. And I told him he was in the wrong lane. That's what it was. And the state trooper pulled him over to give him a ticket. And I told him, you're in the wrong state. You're supposed to be here in Texas. And God is warning you. You're in violation. You're supposed to be here. Well, he wasn't hearing that. And one day while I'm here in Texas, I didn't divorce him then. I was like, nope, I'm not going to do that, because he talked me into saying, well, what, you going to divorce over a house? That's what you're going to divorce over? And so, I was like, okay, fine. And, he left me homeless, basically. I didn't have a place to go, and he didn't check on me either. But what's something is the tenant that I told you guys about, she called me that same night that I was supposed to close, and she had moved in. And she said, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm just driving around. I'm trying to think what hotel to go to. I'm kind of stunned. I'm just stunned at this point. And I'm just driving around. It's in the evening time now. And she says, you don't worry where you lay your head. You come right back here to the house that you loaned to me, and you stay here. So I had some place to go for that night. Thank God I obeyed God and leased it instead of sold it. Because when you sell it, you don't have that open door like that. The keys have been delivered, title has been changed over. You have no ownership of your property whatsoever. But because I obeyed God, I still had ownership in my property. And she allowed me to stay there. And I told her, listen, I'll just stay the weekend. I can't stay here longer than that, because it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be an act of integrity, because you would be paying the lease amount and I would be staying here. No, I'm not going to do that. So that weekend, I got my first apartment in my life. But it was a great fellowship time, and I'm glad I obeyed God because I had a place to go. And so when we fast forward, I'm still here in Texas, and I started having a sense that something was going on with my spouse. Now remember, I want to experience marriage the way God intended for it to be. And I'm sharing all this to take you on a journey in case some of you see yourself in these situations, where you didn't realize you were in a toxic situation. You didn't realize you were being played or manipulated or dragged along into a scheme, or someone telling you something just to put on a facade as though they were really doing something. Or in case you were wondering if you were really hearing God, how is it you obey God and your relationship is not great, right? So in case you find yourself in this, I want you to know of an example of God at work. And the story's not finished yet. So I sensed something was going on. And in that, I called my spouse. He was still my spouse. I called him and I said, I couldn't get a hold of him at first. And when he finally called me back, this is some time has gone on, the whole homeless situation. He never checked on me either to see how I was doing that night or where I stayed or anything. Never checked on me whatsoever. And so some time went on, some months went on, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And finally he called me. He said, they hit the house. I said, what you mean they hit the house? What does that mean? The house had been broken into. And he had a work truck. And they stole the work truck. Now, he had been saying, well, I can't come to Texas. I will come, but I can't because I got to wrap up work and all that. When they stole the work truck, he says, well, I'm down for the count, and I, go ahead and just, talk to the neighbor who was a mortgage loan officer. I'm like, well, I'm a realtor. Why not talk to me so we can put the house up for sale if you really want to move? But he's like, I just talked to the neighbor next door who's a mortgage loan consultant because, it's time to go, I guess. Because they hit the house and they stole the keys and they took the truck. I said, okay. My parents were there to console him and pastor talked to him, all that kind of stuff. The next day rolled around and God woke me up in the middle of the night and told me to call him. And I called him in the middle of the night and I told him to go to the back window. Back window at that house was where you were able to see the garage and the parking space next to the garage. It's like a parking pad next to the garage. And so we had multiple vehicles in that space. And so when he woke up and went to the back. He said, oh no, they took the other car now. The other car was gone. And I said, well, he says, I'm gonna go try and find it. Well, they did end up finding the truck. Some kids took it on a joyride and it was all messed up. And his tools were still there. He said, well, I can still do work now. My tools are there. I said, oh, okay. You don't think you should move though now that you found your tools? Now you're gonna go back on that road of, trying to go back and do work still instead of taking it as a sign to move? No. Mind you, he had the dream. He was in the wrong state. State trooper gave him a ticket. I says, okay. So I stayed prayerful. The third night rolled around. Now they had found the truck. It was all messed up. He got it back, whatever, and had to fix it. That third night rolled around. This is consecutive. The Lord woke me up again in the middle of the night and I called him. And this time he was sitting at the back window and he woke up and he said, oh no, they took the truck again. They took the truck again. And still after all that, he still would not budge, wouldn't move. And he said instead, if you would have been here, they wouldn't have took it. It's your fault. He said it was my fault. And several times throughout the marriage, he had been telling me he didn't want to be married anymore. He stopped wearing his ring. He was putting on a front. each time people came around. Then he would come and sit and entertain the guests. And as soon as they left, he left too and would head across the street to the neighbors and shoot the breeze and talk. And I mean, it was emotional abuse because there was no outpouring of love towards me at all. And it was my fault. It was my fault. You know, his mom didn't get the condo because I said no, the door was closed. It was my fault that the home was broken into, even though he should not have been there in the first place, should have been in Texas and obeyed God. And God had kept giving those words, you know, to tell him, she's been trying to tell you what I've given her to say, and you're not listening. And so now we get to 2010. And the Lord is telling me, dealing with me to let him go. He hasn't called me. The holidays has rolled around. I haven't heard from him. No phone call for months. I said, okay. Anniversary comes and go. If you want an anniversary, if you want to see me, you make the arrangements. I said, no. Not going to do that. That was months later after having not heard from it. And then, you know, I decided one day to go kayaking. I know it sounds like I'm taking you on a journey, but all of it weaves together. You know, you don't know your story and how it will play out while you're going through the process. But all the while, God is at work putting things together. Everything that you go through has purpose. There may be some things in hindsight that you just don't know anything about, but God has purpose in it. What the enemy meant for evil, God will use it for your good. So I decided to just take myself kayaking, right? He had visited and he had an opportunity to stay longer. And he's like, no, I got to get back real quick. Now work is kind of fizzing out. All the stores start closing and everything. The extra work he had starts, you know, dribbling up, or whatever the term is, you know, it starts, you know, drying up. There you go, starts drying up. And I just said, okay, all right, Lord, I'm gonna go take myself kayaking. He needs to go, he's in a rush and all that. I go kayaking, never did it before. The Lord tells me to get the big red boat canoe. I decided I want the little blue one after talking to some people and people giving their suggestions. But the Lord in my spirit told me, get the big red one, right? I want to get the little one. And the people in the office, I asked them, well, you know, can y'all tell me anything about boating and all this kind of stuff, kayaking? No, we haven't done it. But here's the life vest and here's the keys. And okay. So I'm just kind of contemplating everything. I'm talking to the people at the boathouse. What do you recommend? I'm asking everybody else their opinion when God had already told me, get the big red kayak boat. I'm probably calling it the wrong thing, canoe, kayak boat, whatever, that. And so I get the little blue one because I figure I'm small, I can manage that. I get on it. I'm taking pictures on my phone on the water with my life vest on, you know, and I'm taking the pictures of the ducks and all that kind of stuff. And I'm done. So I go attempt to get out the boat. And it's kind of wobbly, it's not stable, and I'm trying to hold on to the anchor on the walkway part and trying to step out the boat. Now, don't y'all laugh if you know how to get off this boat properly, but I'm trying to get off the boat. Well, in the process of doing that, the boat then slipped from under me, and there I am holding on to the anchor thing that the rope's supposed to tie around, look like a Y shape, an iron Y shape, and I'm holding on to it, trying to, you know, pedal my feet and get this boat back, but the water, you know, is taking it. And I'm like, I am not about to die today. I am not dying today. So I call out Jesus, but my voice don't go far because I'm down in the water. My head is above it. I'm down in the water screaming Jesus, so it's not going far. And I said, I am not dying today. And I wouldn't let go of that anchor thing. And I screamed, God, help me, Jesus. And the next thing I knew, there's this man coming, standing over me. He's looking down over me. He's like, so what you doing? And I said, oh, just was boating, kind of kayaking. I'm like, we're having this conversation. He's like, yeah, I was up there reading and I thought I heard something. I was on the sun deck over there reading, back into the pool area. And he heard me. And he's like, well, he's still looking down at me. He's like, next time, why don't you just use those steps right there? He points to the steps. There's a ladder of steps that you're supposed to take to get on and off the kayak. And he points to them and said, next time you use them. I said, oh, okay. And so he's like, I'll help you up. I'm like, thank you. So, I go slopping into the place and here's your keys. The kayak is in the water. And here's your vest. And I go all wet, slushing through the place. And my phone had gotten wet in that process. And it wouldn't power on. So people gave me different things to do, put it in a rice bag and hold it here, do this, do that, and let it dry out. And none of it worked. And I prayed on my phone. I prayed over my phone, Lord, because, our phones is everything, right? It has a lot of stuff in it. I prayed on my phone, and guess what? A little spark of light came back up. But it still wasn't working. So I took it to the phone company, and they said, no, they open it up and they can see the damage of the water, whatever little thing that they use, ticker symbol or dot or whatever, it lets them know whether or not that phone has been immersed in water. And he knew. He's like, no, you need a brand new phone. This phone, it's dead. It's dead. There's no bringing it back. There's nothing that we can do to revive the phone. It's no good. It's dead. And the Lord said, that's how your marriage is. It's dead. You're holding on to it and it's dead. You pray. You're praying for your marriage and you're wishing and hoping and you're praying and you see a little spark. He came to visit. You see a little spark. He made a phone call and you think that there's some hope. But in reality, I see it as dead already. That's how God saw it. And I says, okay, Lord, this is tough. I said, Lord, touch my heart. Touch my mind and my eyes and help me to see him the way that you see him. Help me, Lord. Help me to see him the way you see him. And when I prayed that prayer, I had nothing else in my heart for him as a spouse. Nothing. And I didn't have any hatred for him. I didn't want to see him hurt. I didn't want to bawl him out. None of that. It was just nothing. It was like, I just prayed for the brother, but there was nothing there. There was no hurt. There was no, I have to go through this long grieving process or healing process. I had been crying a couple years earlier when I said, Lord, get me ready for what you're about to do. Not knowing what was to come, right? So, but there was a total severance. And I says, okay. And I remember God sending some people to, drop some things. I remember a friend of mine and she was saying, God told her March 4th, in her situation. And then I remember our pastor at that time, was teaching on toxic relationships. And at the end of that wonderful teaching, he said, now God is waiting on you to make a move. What you gonna do? It's like, whoa. And you know how messages are going on and the people don't know what's going on in your life, but the word is for you and you hear God speaking to you in the message. That's how it was for me. And then I remember on another event, then our pastor's wife, spoke a word and she said, after you've done all that you can do, then that's it. You have nothing left. You gave it your all. You can walk away feeling free. She said something to that effect, and I'm paraphrasing those words. But it was all what I needed to move forward, and what God had already told me, you're holding on to something dead. And I said, okay, Lord, but I wanted marriage the way you intended for it to be. And all the while I had been at church, we were having such great teachings on marriage that I really wish my spouse was there to hear it, because it was so good and it touched on so many topics and discussions that we had had in our home that were good answers and good solutions. It was just confirmation for what God was giving me to say. And let me back up and say, when I left for Texas, the Lord told me to tell him something. And what I said to him was, God said he's going to bless me in spite of you. And I told him that, not knowing what was to come, because mind you, he had been saying all along, I'm gonna come, but he never came. And I told people, yeah, he said he's coming, he's got to wrap some things up, and he never came. So when I had all these confirmations and God told me it was something dead that I was holding on to, he called the marriage dead, then I decided to go ahead and let me just file the papers and make this formal for divorce, because we had been living separated for the last 5 years of the marriage. And there were months where he never contacted me at all, but I was still carrying myself as though I was married. And when I filed those papers, I said, Lord, one more confirmation. Use my brother to speak a word to me, because he knows nothing at all that's going on, and neither does my parents. And my brother just called me out the blue. I know that was moved by God. He called me and he said, Cindy, God's got somebody for you. That's what he said. God's got somebody for you. And he just began speaking a word of the Lord and just speaking prophetically to me, at least for about an hour. And it was confirmation. I said, okay. And then I talked to my spouse and I asked a question. I said, let me ask you something. All those times you had me looking for a home, looking for a property, and then when I find it, because I would pray for every single client, and I would ask God to give me wisdom, and he would send me to their property every single time. Never failed. And I did the same thing with my spouse at that time. And there was properties, and then he changed and said, well, I want this. And then I find it. And then he changed and said with his home, well, I want the value to be more so I can do this and that. And then God said, improve to move. And the Chicago Bungalow Initiative came, right? And so I said, all those times, did you really have any intention to move? He said, I'm going to just shame the devil now. It's about phone. I'm going to shame the devil now. Nope. Never had any intention to move. Never. I said, okay, thank you. I just wanted to know what I was dealing with. And you could sense the atmosphere change. And I'm sure he could sense something just happened. She's different. But my mind was made up. God had already severed my heart, and I was ready to move forward, and I did. And I did what I had to do online. I signed the papers, and the last thing I said to him as we were hanging up on a different call was, yep, love you, But I loved him, in a different way. I don't hate him. I have no reason to contact or anything like that. But I let him go in my heart. And my mom was saying to me, she said, when she learned that I filed for the divorce and was just waiting on it to be finalized, she says, Cindy, God hates divorce. I said, yes, he does. I agree. And, you just, hold out and just pray, saying things that, a parent or a loved one who wants to see your marriage succeed would say. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, but God told me to let him go, that I was holding on to something dead. And she's like, yeah, okay. I said, Mom, I want you to ask God, because he gave me my answer. And I already filed for the divorce, and I'm moving forward. I said, but respectfully, Mom, I'm asking you to ask God to give you your answer that you need from Him. About a day or so went by. Ring, ring. My mom calls me up. She says, let him go in a heartbeat. I said, what happened? God gave her a vision and showed her in the dream me. God allowed her to feel everything that I have felt and had been going through and not sharing. And she said, let him go in a heartbeat. And of course, now in hindsight, all those times when the Lord had her to come visit and she saw me and I looked terrible because I was up all night, which I shared with y'all before. Or when the Lord moved her to come visit again and I was locked in and didn't even know it. And so I couldn't get out and they couldn't get in. And so, just all those things. And then the times my dad, when, the guy is arguing with me and I don't want to argue and we're up late at night, he's trying to lock me in and my dad takes the phone, gets on the call and has to talk to him and speak the word. And my dad said something to him when he didn't sign the paperwork. He said, are you ready for the consequences to follow? Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. All right. And so it would be 2 years following that I would end up filing for the divorce. Everyone else could see it, but I could not, because I'm in it till death do we part and I'm trying to fight for my marriage. It's been, all this time and you just hope. You see the spark. So, you just hope. And that's where I was. And so I remember I was so happy when I filed the divorce. I just felt joy. I asked God to make my heart towards the situation the way that God's heart was towards the situation. I just, felt so joy and at peace. And then God told me to go volunteer at my church. Now, I had been working, and when I get an off day, I want to be off. And I finally got off and I did not want to go volunteer. And the church kept asking, come on, we need volunteers for, this teen spiritual encounter, as it was called. And oh my goodness, I say, okay. Now, I had found this church when I moved to Texas. And my neighbor had been waiting on me to move next door, Miss Janice. And the first thing I said when I, rolled in there was that next morning, Quevelin was there too. I said, I got to find me a church. That's the first thing we got to find is a church. I'm like a fish out of water. I need my church. And the neighbor offered me an invitation to come visit and Quevelin flew him back, but I went to go visit. And when I stepped foot in the sanctuary, and it was worship time, I didn't know the pastor. I had never heard of him before. I mean, Quevelin did, and she had said, oh, that's somebody's preacher. And her and my neighbor were talking, but, and he's on that word. Yes, indeed. And I says, well, I don't know him, but, when I walked into that sanctuary and the worship was going on, I still hadn't seen the family or the pastor or anything. I just heard God in my spirit say, this is home. And so I said, this is home. This is my set place. And I remember the welcome letter from the ministry coming in the mail, as a new member. And it said that we teach people to live a first-class lifestyle, and a marriage like God intended. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I found that out afterwards. And it was so confirmational for me. I don't even know if that's a word, but confirmational. That's the word I'm going to use. And it was so great. And so I go volunteer. I know I kind of jumped through, but I kind of want to bring you through the backstory so you can follow through with me and have that understanding of being in it the way that I was. And so I go and I volunteer at church, okay? And it's for the spiritual encounter. And the Lord said, now the encounter was to start that evening. The Lord told me to get up that morning and go that morning to volunteer. Like, that's like punching the clock. But I will obey. So I obeyed and I got up and I went. And the person that opened up the door is my current husband. He opened the door. I didn't think anything of it because my divorce wasn't finalized just yet. I had already filed for it. It had been a few months of me waiting, and I had another month or two to go. And so I still acted as though I was married. And so I didn't think anything of it, but he opened up the door. And, that was the first time I saw him. And he just kind of gravitated towards me. I didn't have on my wedding ring, but he gravitated towards me and just kind of had a little conversation here and there, but nothing like, weird or like he was trying to flirt. He was just nice and just had conversation. And I learned later he was the biggest volunteer in the church, and you would think he at work there. He do now at the time of this recording, but he did not then. And so, long story short, through the process of time, the divorce was finalized. And we just, developed a friendship, and kept things at the church. And we ended up getting married. God confirmed that I was his wife. And God had already told me that, he was my husband. And we'll save that whole thing for another video to go in depth, and it would be great to have him here to share his part of the story, and I'll share my part of the story. And we did write a book about it, a quick book plug, which we'll share when we share our story too, perhaps. And all the while I had been going to the services and stuff, I had been wishing, all those years that I was there. Man, I wish my husband was here. He was there. I just had never seen him. I had never seen him there. And I was thinking marriage the way God intended with the spouse that I had, when God had another plan with the spouse that he intended, who was obeying. And in the end, of course, I asked, Lord, why did this end in divorce when, I waited for you to get married? Lord, I waited to get married, and you kept me as a virgin, and it still ended in divorce. I heard from you that he was my husband, talking about the first one, and he was assured that I was his wife, but it still ended in divorce. How is that? And the Lord said, remember Saul? Yeah, I chose Saul. I anointed Saul as king. I said, yeah. He said, but when Saul disobeyed, I rejected Saul. Remember, my spouse would not obey God concerning the real estate move. He wouldn't do it and kept giving excuses. I didn't realize God had rejected him and had taken me from him, just like my mom said. God caused you to leave your husband. That's what she told me. I was like, oh no, who heard of something like that? What? But he did. When he told me to go to Texas, establish my business in Texas, Pottery Barn, he told me something else too, which I'm in the process of doing. And I shared with my current husband that process. And so it was just something. But he said, just like I rejected Saul as king and took the kingdom away from Saul, I rejected him when he rejected me, and I took you away from him. And God anointed another king, which was David, while Saul was still alive. And that's what happened. God chose my current husband when he sent me to church to volunteer, even though I was behaving myself as still married. I wasn't flirting. I wasn't doing any of that. And God sent me there to volunteer, to meet my husband, who would become my husband, while Saul was still alive, before the divorce was finalized. But again, before it was even finalized, we did not date. We did not behave as though we were, courting or whatever you want to call that. We didn't do that. We were just friends, and that was it. And so that's a whole nother story. But God set me up is what he did. He set me up. And now I experience marriage the way God intended for it to be. So if there's a not meeting of the eye on something, We go and pray to God about what we should do. God gives wisdom and we act together. His relationship with God is so strong and so great. His faith walk is so strong and so great. His faith is even crazier than mine. And that's what's so awesome. And it's marriage the way God intended for it to be. It's not hard. And I remember God singing a song to my heart, you know, that this love won't hurt. This love won't hurt you. This love is for you. This love is not against you. It's an Oleta Adams song. And I says, thank you, Lord, that this one's okay. Because I was fine. I didn't want to be married anymore after that experience. I was like, you know what? I'm good. I'm not looking to get married. I don't want to be bothered. Lord, you kept me before. You can keep me again. I'm just not interested. I'm happy. I'm so joyful. I'm really happy. And God had another plan. And he's blessed me in spite of. Remember when I didn't get that home that was built by KB? Well, we recently moved into, you can see some behind me, a KB home. Isn't that awesome? And it's better. And it's with my current spouse. So God is so awesome. I don't want you guys to give up as you're going through the process. Trust God every step of the way. Watch your words and agree with God. And God will make things line up for you. It has to change. Don't lose faith. Stay encouraged. And God will make your situation turn around and line up with your faith. Y'all be encouraged till next time. Bye.